am here with my sister, Tracie Guy Decker. And yes, there's a hyphen there.
And I'm here with my sister, Emily Guy Birkin, but she does not use a hyphen.
And together we are doing Lightbringers, where we illuminate the deeper meaning of the crime-solving devil TV show. And yes, we are overthinking it.
We are. It's true. We're overthinking it. So today we're going to talk about season 2, episodes 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
So, and those 2 episodes are called Sin Eaters and Lady Parts.
Do not touch the charred crotch.
Is a sentence I never thought I'd say. All right. So if we're going to overthink it anyway, because we are.
Of course.
I actually think that Sin Eaters starts to get at some stuff that I actually have been thinking about a lot. I mean, in the same way that we talked about the fact that there's some propaganda in this series, and like I own the fact that when I was initially thinking about it, I was like, yeah, but if it wasn't a police procedural, what would it be? As if that's the only way to tell a story on television.
What other kind of storytelling is there?
But in that same sort of like, as if there isn't another way, I think like getting at the idea of like punishment being the only or the best consequence for wrongdoing is another one of those grooves that is so well worn that you don't even realize that there are other ways. And I think that there's something about this episode that starts to actually I don't know, chip away at that groove that I think as a series, not until season 6 do we actually see an attempt to transform, sort of in a more like transformative justice, like abolitionist kind of way. By which I mean specifically like the philosophy that looks to actually stop punishing people, but and works on healing them based on wrongdoing. We're not there yet. We're not there yet.
Very much not there yet.
But this episode really did start to at least like ask questions about it. And I appreciated that. I think that in fact the bit of dialogue from which the title comes, I think starts to do that. When Lucifer's standing there in the offices of Wobble and says, no one chooses to be a sin eater. And that even just the way that it's phrased, I think is really like starts to question that punishment as consequence is the only or even the best way.
Well, and there is even the sense that by doing that, it is causing yourself trauma. You get that with the perpetrator. The people for the first 2 people he punished were pretty reprehensible human beings. Just reprehensible. Like there's not really much you can say to excuse that.
Well, there's nothing you can say to excuse the behavior. And also, like, is death actually the appropriate?
Well, and so it's one of those where you start off with, and you even see Lucifer, like after with the second death, where he's like, this guy's doing great work. I don't want to stop him.
These guys deserve what they got.
Yeah. Now, of the 2, I think that the second was, well, I don't know. Like, it's hard to say. Like they both humiliated people. And in the second example, the person he humiliated committed suicide.
Right. I think that was actually important for the case of for the storytelling, like so that we as viewers could go along with I mean, posting the sex tape is wrong. I'm not suggesting otherwise. But the writers wanted us to actually sort of, at least in some sense, agree with Lucifer, at least for a time, that the punishment somehow fit the crime. And so it actually required that poor young woman's death.
Yes. And the thing, well, and that also, like, in terms of story construction, that also meant that we knew she wasn't the perpetrator. Like, so in terms of story construction, that was required in order to make the story work in multiple levels. Um, the thing that is interesting to me is that the perpetrator, Ray, he started off with someone he knew who had done something that was pretty awful, and he saw the consequences to a third party who had done nothing wrong. And then moved on to this young man who had brought about the death of a woman, not intentionally, but he did intentionally humiliate her, because she lost her job and all of that. And so we don't know how either of these victims felt. Like, we don't know, like, the man after the death of his ex-girlfriend, because of what he did, he may have been horrified. We don't know. We don't see that. And been like, oh my God, I have to turn my life around. I have to change. I need to get into therapy. I need to figure out what it was in me that felt that it was reasonable to post revenge porn, because a woman rejected me. So anyway, there is reason for the audience. The audience is given reason to see what Ray is doing as kind of righteous.
The first victim of the humiliation, I mean, he claimed it as his own.
Yes.
Said, yeah, I did it. I killed him.
Yeah.
So there's, yeah.
But by meting out this punishment, Ray becomes a monster himself, which he would be even if he had not kidnapped Lila and tried to kill her, who she had not done anything wrong,
well,
other than
allow the sin eating.
Yes. And then, thinking about, like, this episode came out in, I don't know, 2016, 2017, thinking about Facebook since then, and what we know about Facebook, that adds a new twist to it, because again, like, there's you're right, Lila, like, she did allow the sin eating, and she didn't fire the first victim.
In fact, she dated him. We learn.
Yeah. They called him charming.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think the other thing that's interesting is that what Lucifer realizes about Ray when he's talking to Ray and says, you think you deserve this too. I think that actually is really becomes a through line, I think, about his character for the rest of the series, in that, he somehow thinks he deserves to be a punisher, to be a sin eater, to be the one, the devil face and all of that, like the self-actualization that we later learn is true of him. And I think that, so I think that moment of realization, which is not, I mean, I think it's explicit, but it's not sort of, there's no exposition around it. They don't talk about it. You just see it happen, which I think is really, it's an important moment in terms of, like, the story arc of the character, and the development of the character. And there's no exposition around it, but it's very, very clear, especially since the very next episode, he is distracting himself from what he's
discovered
doing and not doing. Like, very actively distracting himself from it, and says so explicitly. So I think that's it's an interesting moment. And in terms of the, like, so coming back to my first point here about the punishment as being, like, the only way, or that groove that we kind of get stuck in, like, I realized on rewatching Lady Parts, and then we should actually talk about the friendship, but I realized on rewatching Lady Parts that I think that my first viewing, I didn't, even though it's very clear, D.B. Woodside as Amenadiel says, what if God takes back God's end of the bargain, and Lucifer says, one human soul, he's not going to do anything. I mean, that's not going to matter to him. And then immediately cuts to Chloe in the car before the car accident. So, I mean, the implication is very clear that God, in fact, is taking his side of the bargain back. I totally missed it the first time around. I just got stuck in like, oh my gosh, she was in the car accident. Like I did not see the cause and effect, which I think is very clearly laid out there. I just was like caught in the surface level of the story.
When you're binging, you know?
Yeah. So, but I think that's like, there's a lot of layers actually, I think in these two episodes together around the requirement for punishment fitting the crime, the role and personality and toll on the punisher. Like I think there's a lot of layers that are about Lucifer, but also sort of about society and also about like God and or just kind of karma. I mean, they even use that word karma at one point about Yuri, the John who tried to hire the two dead girls in the second.
There's a couple things that brings up for me. One is, so Lucifer, he is horrified and he goes back into the case when his mother suggests that he is only still punishing because it's the role God gave him and that he is still trying to be God's good boy. And he's like, no, absolutely not. And so he wants to talk to Ray to find out why he is punishing. And that's what makes him realize, like, I enjoy it. It makes me happy. And I love that his mother's response is, well, mother can't ask for a better reason. It's like, I am thinking, like, I think that with some of the stuff that kids like to watch, I'm like, well, if it makes you happy, like, I can't, I'm never going to understand why you like this show.
Right.
But it doesn't make him happy because otherwise he wouldn't go throw himself into distraction in the very next episode. And he actually says no one chooses to be a sin eater. And like, just because he's good at it, doesn't mean it makes him happy. It means it's a groove, you know, like what you're saying. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect, thinking about karma and about consequences and things like that, is we're recording this on the Tuesday after the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict. And a lot of people, particularly well-meaning white folks, were posting stuff like, this is horrible, our justice system is not working, but karma's going to get him. And I saw it over and over and over again. Now, part of this is because though I know better, I camp out in the comments and places because I cannot help myself. But then I saw a couple of Black influencers that I follow saying, like, that is a very white thing to say because it's abdicating responsibility. It's saying like, oh, we'll let karma handle this. And that's kind of what Lucifer is doing, you know, to tie it back to the show that is the reason why we're talking. But he's saying like, oh, it's fine. It's a loophole. Like, I don't need to worry about it. And then that's what he's doing with the distraction and all of that, is abdicating responsibility for something that is his responsibility, as we abdicate our collective responsibility for social justice when we shrug and say karma's going to get him. And that's, I mean, they do this in a TV show because it's fictional and you can create a satisfying ending. Where there is something that happens because of that, and he does actually have to deal with his stuff.
I think there's even more than that. It's even more than the karma piece in terms of like our collective responsibility, which does tie to the show, which is that fundamentally, like, by saying like, oh, this is a shame and it shouldn't have happened and karma will get him, there's also no there's no recognition or ownership of the fact that the system worked exactly the way the system was designed. Yeah. This was not a failure of the justice system, because it's not a justice system, right? It's a punishment system.
Injustice system.
And it's a punishment system that is specifically designed to punish Black and brown folks and not punish white folks in the same way. And so it worked exactly the way it was designed. And so it's not just about like I think it's not just about abdicating our personal responsibility by saying karma is going to get him. It's also like allowing the structures that made the injustice happen continue. And that, I think, is part of what I'm getting at when I talk about like the questioning whether or not punishment is even like the right thing. I mean, and I don't think that Lucifer is doing that here by his loophole, because ultimately what he's saying is God told me to punish her and I'm punishing her in a different way. That's what he's claiming the loophole is. Now, the fact of the matter is, which becomes clear later, is God didn't actually tell him anything. God showed him the empty cell. I don't know what to call it. The broken lock and the empty cell. There were no words exchanged.
Well, and as we'll learn later, like God didn't tell Uriel anything either.
Right. Who we haven't quite met. We meet him in the next episode.
We haven't met yet, but so for these consequences, these are all like
other people.
And that's a good point. It's people putting their interpretation on things, which is very much what we're seeing with Karma's Gonna Get Him, as well as the people who are lauding this person as a hero.
Or even the folks who are sort of saying, well, the justice system failed. It's a lack of recognition of the problems in the structures. Right. And it's sort of saying, it's like the idea that of like one bad apple in a police force, like, no, there's a structural problem.
Yes.
We try to make it like the problem of an individual. We're actually shirking some of our responsibility and true solutions, and sort of saying like, well, this is what how Lucifer is like us. He's saying, well, I'm still punishing her. I'm just punishing her my way. Well, is punishment in fact what's called needed for? Is that the structure that is in fact what is needed or asked for, or, most beneficial to all involved? Anyway, that's been on my mind a lot lately. The same sources that Lucifer is loosely drawing on, i.e. the canon of biblical, Talmudic, and early Christian literature, makes that assumption. It is some of the same sources that our so-called justice system claim to lean on.
Well, and I mean, the other thing that happened this weekend, so I am in Wauwatosa, which is just 10 minutes away from Waukesha, which is where there was that horrible mass casualty event at the parade where that man fleeing another crime scene ran over 48 people, I think it is now.
Yeah.
At a parade. And it's coming out that he was out on $1,000 bail for domestic violence for running over the mother of his child in a gas station parking lot. And everything I'm seeing is people are saying like, there's something wrong with our system that he is out on bail. And that like, people are blaming like, this is the Democrats' fault because they're soft on crime. This is so-and-so. This is why there's a problem with bail reform and blah, blah, blah. And he should be locked up. And the thing that I keep coming back to is like, the system is not set up in a way to help whoever that man was stop doing anything, like anything negative. He's got a long rap sheet and there's nothing set up in order to help him change the direction of his life.
There's nothing set up to actually heal the trauma that's causing this behavior, right?
Yes,
I mean, I think that's ultimately the problem with punishment, which is what actually the Lucifer series says in the end. In the very end. But if this person has interacted with the system many times, and that was many opportunities for us as a collective to provide some sort of healing. And instead it's a matter of just restricting
his movement.
And that's we behave as a society as if that is our only tool in the toolkit.
Yeah. And what's frustrating to me is that when something fails in other aspects of our society, we change it. So for instance, this man ran his SUV through the barricade, which was just sawhorses, because the assumption is that no one's going to run through that. That's like they understand sawhorse means you can't go there, and he barreled through it 40 or 50 miles an hour. And so I suspect that going forward, at least in Wisconsin, probably going to barricade roads with something like a fire truck. So that something, a tragedy like this cannot happen again. And so that's immediate, like, how can we fix this? How can we do this? But we don't have that same response to helping to heal the trauma that causes people to repeatedly be within the justice system. And that's, like, to tie it back to I almost called it burn crotch, charred crotch, sin eaters. So I pack it sin eaters. The way Wobble handles things is they have people who have to go through and find these videos and take them down. But they don't like fire the person who did something that humiliated someone. They don't change the system of Wobble or social media so that it discourages this, other than like take it down as soon as it comes up as best you can. Like, we only have one way of looking at things when it's certain types of systems, whereas other types of things, you've got an IKEA dresser that falls over and hurts one child, they recall them all. So, and that's the thing that's so frustrating to me is like, there's this innovation that we can come up with in order to solve things without solving like the human problems that are going to keep happening over and over and over again if we don't do something other than punish. Yeah. So on that note, let's talk about lady parts and friendship.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, can I just say, Linda is hilarious to me because she's like, let's bring this down a notch, like lower the temperature. Maybe she's being a raging bitch. Oh no, I started a bar fight. I'm going to hide under the bar and go, what's happening? What's happening? Like, Linda, you own this. Granted, you'd had a few drinks.
Yeah.
I love that she was just like, let's calm down for a minute. And then she causes this huge bar fight.
Yeah. So I think that I'm going to name it, actually, this type of betrayal shows up repeatedly in Lucifer. This sort of like, Maze got paid to take, or, had a bet to take Chloe out. And then Chloe feels like just totally betrayed because she was genuinely vulnerable and had a good time. And then the one that I'm thinking about right now is the, we don't get it for a little while, but the 1940s throwback where we learn about Lilith and the marital problems between the private eye played by Lauren German and the private eye's wife played by Tricia Helfer. I don't know why I have such a hard time with Trisha's last name.
You'd just be on first name basis with her.
Yeah. So
Trisha, we go way back.
Right. So, but the reason they're having marital trouble is because the Lauren German private eye character has realized that their wife was a call girl and was paid to take her out, to take them out the first time. So I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I just think that I don't feel like that's a thing that actually happens that often in the real world. Or maybe I'm sheltered. I don't know, but it just seems like that's not actually a thing that happens all that often, but it happens in TV and movies quite a lot.
I mean, I guess it's not that specific betrayal, but there's a similar betrayal or feeling of being let down when you realize you're not as close of friends with someone as you thought you were.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And that happens to all of us.
That's true. There's something very specific about this though. That's like taming of the shrew kind of,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
um, like the specific mechanism of being paid or bet
Mhm.
to be friendly with someone
Yeah.
is something that I feel like shows up actually quite regularly in literature.
Yeah.
And or maybe I'm just lucky that it has shown up in
I
my life. I don't know.
Well, you don't know that I pay. I'm trying
You
to
got some
think.
splaining to do.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that is a very specific thing, but I think it's getting to something that is universal. It's
Yeah,
just
that's a good
got to
point.
have a shortcut for
Yeah.
for for
Yeah, because
storytelling.
it's a 40-minute show. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I do like I also appreciate that like Lucifer asks her like name three people you could call to have a drink with, and you can't name me, your child, or the man you're divorcing. Um, and just as a mom who is a little older, but about, I mean, like Lauren German's actually about the same age as me, but I think she's playing a little younger. Um, but that I resonate with.
Yeah, I was thinking about
And
that just this morning. Actually, I was like, do they all have to be local?
well, and that's the thing is like
Have
I
to be people,
certainly
but they're
have,
not local.
I know three people who I would love to get a drink with. They're not all three in the same friend group.
Right.
So like that's one of the problems. Like I couldn't get four women, including myself, out.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily all local. And yeah, and so that's partially like just a function of what it is to be a parent with a full-time job.
Right.
And like just aging, even like I think
Yeah.
even if you weren't a
Welcome
parent,
to middle age. Yep.
yeah, it's so much harder to meet friends. So like it's understandable like when you see Chloe starting to enjoy herself, like there is something very sweet about that, her realization like, oh, I do have people, like I do have some women who are with me. And then she says, I've never had women friends like this. And like you, as you learn, I mean, she was acting as like a teenager, and so I don't know if she went to school or went to college. I don't know if that's required to become a detective, but in any case, she did not have the typical experiences that even lead to the like three people who are not local.
Right.
You could have, because like that's where a lot of my friends would be from, is like from college, or the first job out of college, are people far flung all across the country who would love to have a drink with me, but it's a 12-hour drive to get to them.
Right. Right.
So, and that I can imagine feeling that same sort of like, hey, these women are here and they care about me, and we could do this again. And I like her sense of betrayal is completely
It's very understandable.
understandable.
And there's something very comedic, but also just really sad about her like beating the killer with the yoga mat at the end. There's a special place in hell.
Oh, so I love how Maze is trying to convince Chloe, like, hey, pulling her hair, that was genuine. Whatever it was that she did, it was sweeter. I really do like the odd couple nature of Maze and Chloe's friendship.
Which is sort of introduced here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think actually that's why in my first viewing, I didn't put together the causal relationship between Lucifer breaking the deal and Chloe getting in a car accident, even though it's now that I'm rewatching, it seems pretty clearly spelled out. I think I was so shocked by the fact that Chloe is in fact going to live with Maze that I was like, oh wow, she's really going to get that apartment with Maze, and then the crash.
Yeah.
And so like I just lost the
thread. Yeah.
thread that the writers actually very clearly set up for me.
Yeah.
But I just got distracted by that other detail.
Well, because it is like, they're gonna do what now?
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, how is this gonna work?
Right. Right. Then, I mean, even the way Maze talks about it, like, I like your kid and you dress terrible, so I won't borrow your clothes.
Yeah. And I don't want to kill you anymore, so I think it's gonna work great.
Let's sell it, Maze.
And she just stole her donut.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that that's understandable. That's an understandable, because it went from like her going, huh, to like on the phone, like 2 women and a child. Like, wait, what? Like, you're actually doing this? Okay, then.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we did in Lady Parts have one of those like, who's staying with Trixie moments, because they were both working at night. Both Dan and Chloe are working at night. And it's just like, what?
That happens so often. I've just decided they have
Just,
a babysitter on call or Penelope. Like,
yeah.
because it just
Yeah.
happens all the time.
It happens all the time. And I like first watch through, like I noticed it sometimes, but generally was just like, there are some things that I forgive in television shows, and some that bother me a little bit more than others. And so like when people complain about how large apartments are in television shows, particularly like Friends,
Right.
I'm like, I give that a pass because of the logistics of filming a multi-camera television show. It's just not possible to have a realistic looking New York apartment. And if it's going to be big, you might as well go for it.
Mm-hmm.
But then some things like, who is staying with the small child? That bothers me a little bit more, even though I know logistically it's just like, well, the actress playing the small child is at school because she's a child and can't be in every episode, and the adults still need to be in the show.
Right.
So yeah, I know that logistically. Now, I did want to talk about briefly about Amenadiel. Well, first of all, just praise to DB Woodside for the comedic delivery of Cosmos are yummy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there were several actually when he's like worried about the wings and he's trying to explain to Linda and she thinks he's talking about erectile dysfunction.
Yes.
And then he like looks down toward his crotch and then just like looks at her. Like,
yeah.
So good.
And so like thinking about he's got kind of a smaller part in these two,
Both of these
episodes, but he is also like when he comes in at the end where he's just like, God is going to have consequences, he's saying that because he's personally feeling them.
Yeah.
Like he's lost his wings, he's lost his powers, and that's like I think that's really I think one of the through lines of the show is that Lucifer continuously makes things about him, and I think similarly all the Celestials take what's happening to them and apply it elsewhere, even though like we later learn that God's not taking anything away from Amenadiel. There's
right,
you know.
Right, but there's even just the build that Amenadiel clearly wants help and wants to talk about this, but isn't quite there yet. That he brings it up with Linda, and then he gets upset and says, "I can't take her." You know, he like hits the bar or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that feels like an invitation.
Yes.
To tell Lucifer, but like Lucifer.
But because Lucifer is Lucifer, he can't.
Well, that's very dramatic. I think you need to, it's just, he's just not there.
Well, same thing with when Chloe gets upset when she realizes that Maze was paid basically.
Right. You should be thanking me, he says. Yeah.
And then she's like pissed off and he's asking Dan, what did you say to her? It's just like, what are you doing, man? Yeah. Like clearly we can see where the onset of that upset came from. So can you maybe put some things together?
Yeah.
So, but that's part of the reason why we love the show is like that self-centered confidence is fun to watch, would be horrific to live with.
Right.
But yes, it's very fun to watch. And it does a decent job of giving cover for, like, it's talking about story construction again. Yeah, that I can't, when he bangs the counter, normal human beings would talk to each other at that point, and the secret would come out. But because Lucifer is who he is, the story construction allows it to remain a secret. Where, you know, a lot of long running shows, they'll have things that have to stay a secret for a long time for show reasons, but like the story construction and character work makes no sense.
Right.
Because it's just like, no, you would actually talk to each other. Would you please stop? This is ridiculous. You're being an idiot. So whereas this, it fits within the character, which is again, one of the reasons why we stan Joe and LD. Like they have figured out ways to maintain stuff that could be difficult to maintain because of just how they write these characters and make the decisions the characters make centered in who they are. There are a couple of false notes at certain points, but for the most part, it works really, really well.
Yeah. I think maybe we overthink it enough for one day.
Yeah, we done overthunk it enough today.
You got any final pet peeves or fluff to share?
I just have to say, I love all the weird like discomfort that Lucifer has with his mother and Charlotte's body, like when she's dancing on the table and he's like, please stop talking. And then he like picks her up and then like he's doing this because her butt's right by his head.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Mine is the flirtation between Lucifer and Ella right now.
Yeah.
Where they're sort of like kind of sharing silly jokes and stuff. And there's definitely like a wink and I don't know, it's a flirtation still at this point, which is kind of fun because it stops being that at some point. And so I have that the whole arc in my head. So remembering this when she's still getting to know him and like laughing at his tasteless jokes.
I do have to say, like all his crotch burning jokes, there was like at least one where
the crotch burning joke. She said the burning bush.
Yes.
And he says, that was actually me. Don't tell anyone.
And then she goes, oh yeah, sure. And winks.
Man, it says an angel of the Lord. It could have been that angel, I guess.
But he says one where I'm like, that's not a thing. People don't say that. Like he says like hot pants, great balls of fire. Then it was just like burning crotch or something. I'm like, I might be misremembering, and maybe it's just something I've never come across. But I'm like, that's not a thing. People don't say that. That's not a pun.
Oh, I don't remember that one. I was stuck on the burning bush one.
Oh, that was an excellent addition. That also I really appreciated. When they're trying to find the phone of the second victim, and she finds that it's like because they
he says, and he's like, it could be a booby trap.
Might be a booby trap, and then her eye roll is a thing of beauty. she does this like eye roll where one eye closes and the other one rolls. It is amazing.
All right, sis. I'll see you next week.
See you next week.